Hello everyone, we're just letting attendees into the webinar at the moment and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. If you've just joined, and we're just letting everyone into the webinar at the moment and we'll get started in a couple of minutes from now. We're having a piece of music composed for us at Community Land Scotland at the moment, so in the future anyone joining our webinars will get a rousing tune about the benefits of community ownership for the first couple of minutes. I can see now that most people seem to have joined us. The numbers coming in have slowed down a bit, so I think we'll just get going. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lindsay Chambers. I'm the Development Manager at Community Land Scotland. In my spare time, I'm also the Vice Chair of a community shop in South Cowell in Argyll, so it's a subject that I'm very enthusiastic about and can talk endlessly about. This event today is the latest in the series we're running called Meet the Pioneers, where we're meeting communities that are running assets or services. In the past, we've looked at housing and renewables and large estates. And today we're looking at shops and pubs. It seems like a really good one for us to take a closer look at. Thanks to the Scottish Land Fund and the community shares model, we've seen a whole new wave of community shops coming through recently, and I think the amount of interest in community pubs is increasing. We know it's a very difficult time for retail and pubs at the moment, so our expectation is that this is probably something there's going to be a growing demand for amongst communities. I think shops have really shown their benefits over the last year as well during COVID, and hopefully we'll hear a little bit about that today from our participants. So today, in terms of the format, we're going to hear from some shops and a pub about their story. They're each going to talk for 5 minutes. We're then going to have a short panel discussion with the group, and we'll have a question and answer session after that. Shops and pubs are a bit different in that we felt it was quite important to bring along the kind of specialist support providers today to talk as well. So at the end of our hour with the shops and pub, we'll be having a half-hour session with Community Share Scotland and the Plunkett Foundation, and we'll be talking about everything you really need to know in terms of purchasing and getting a shop and pub running. We always record these sessions, and you can see them on our Vimeo channel afterwards. All of our previous Meet the Pioneers webinars are up there as well. And just in terms of practicalities, if you could type your questions into the Q&A, we'll keep all the questions until after everyone has talked today. If there's anyone you're particularly keen to ask a question of, just put their name in your question and I'll make sure that we direct the question to that person. So first up today, we have Iain McNicol, who's the chair of Appin Community Co-op. Iain has been dividing his time recently between vaccinating people as well as being the chair of a community shop. When we set up the shop in our own village here, we were asking around which is a really good shop to go and visit. Almost everyone told us to go to Port Appin because this shop has been running since 1984. So they've got a huge amount of experience there. And I think we still look back to all the things that Iain told us when we visited. I remember one thing Iain said was that they meet every Monday morning to the finance meeting, and we were on the bus back, we were like, no, we're going to have a rest after we finish buying the shop, and then it'll just be like an easy, once we own the shop, it'll be easy. Of course, our chair now finds herself having a meeting about finance every Monday morning, just as Iain predicted. So I think we really benefited from everything Iain was able to tell us. So I'm going to hand over to Iain now to tell us a bit more about what's happening in Port Appin. Thanks, Iain.
Fescamar, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Yes, okay, that's fine. In 1980, Port Appin Stores was on the market for a year, and nobody was interested in buying it. And there's a real fear it would be closed and sold as a jewellery shop. And that was the only retail grocery store in the Appin area. So the community was quite shaken. In early 1981, when an absentee landlord who had a holiday home here bought it for his wife for a Christmas present, which was a philanthropic movement, not cynical one, which many believe, we decided we better set something up in case this ever happened again. So under the Hands and Hands Development Board Community Cooperative scheme, we looked at various things, set up a steering committee. We looked at setting up a brewery, a bakery, a carpentry business, all sorts of things. And then the owner of the shop came to me and said, would you be interested in buying the shop at the price we paid for it? And we'll keep it on the table for as long as it takes, providing we think you're making progress. So this is a great opportunity. So I had lots of public meetings, and in those days with this cooperative scheme, the deal was if you sold a £50 share, the HIDV matched it pound for pound, which made persuading people to part with 50 quid much easier. We've got a lot of promissory notes on the assumption that if we did form a cooperative, they would buy the share. So by the end of 1983, we actually set up Appin Community Cooperative Limited with £34,000 of capital, which was fantastic, half of which had been paid for by the HIDB. In May 1984, we were able to buy Port Appin stores. We closed it for 3 days, and in those 72 hours, we ripped the walls out, we ripped the floor out, we ripped the shelving out, we completely revamped it, laid a new concrete floor, and reopened on the Tuesday with totally new stock, totally new layout, and turnover doubled, and it never looked back from that. So we had a very sort of hectic time of that. We were run by the shareholders elect a management committee of between 5 and 15 members, and the business model is under the Friendly and Provident Society. We have a professional manager who the management committee appoint, and he's responsible for appointing other staff and the day-to-day management of the shop. We don't use any volunteers for actual working in the shop, although lots of volunteers run around it, like the management committee, etc. We have an elected secretary and treasurer who are the legal guardians of the business. From 1984, things were very busy. The business sort of grew by fits and starts because we were trying to learn as we went along. We had a 3-year management grant, which reduced from the HIDB, which helped tremendously. 1985, the major super quarry at Glensander decided that they would use us for most of their food and stock which they used, which was tremendous because it gave us a lot of clout with the wholesalers in milk, bread, and fruit and veg particularly. And this was a great benefit for the shop. By 1990, we were being asked by so many people, could we give money for this or that or the other, that we set up a community trust, which receives the dividend from the shareholders on an annual basis. It's a block dividend. And that can give for educational and charitable purposes or for the good of Appin, and has been a very, very useful tool. By 2001, we rebuilt the shop because it was too small for purpose. So we knocked down 4 old sheds, built a new store in every inch of space that we had, and turned the old shop into the craft shop, which we lease. And that's been very successful as well. The benefits to the community from the community trust, which is funded by about net profits of about between 1% and 2% on average. We have been able to set up a community housing project because we could set up the planning permission and get the initial land, which a local landowner gave us at half price. We sold to the Housing Association. We built a playing field, a play park, an all-weather pitch at the school. We renovated the Jubilee Bridge, which is an iconic footbridge across Loch Leich, which was £165,000. We refloored the Port Appin Hall, which was 60 years old and needed replacing. We built a community car park opposite the church and the village hall, the big hall up in the village. And also that was access to the cycle track. So it had both a community and a tourist dimension to it. We bought the red telephone box outside the front door and made that into a book exchange, which again goes very well and actually makes about £400 a year profit for charity. In 2020, the pandemic, the cooperative has really come into its own. We immediately COVID-proofed the shop. We made a one-way system. We had cough sheets put up by the tills. We bought PPE for the staff way before the government had got them for the health service. And we asked people to socially distance. Because the one-way system, it was relatively easy to do that. And people have been absolutely tremendous at doing that. If we see people having a blether, we ask them, please have a blether outside, which they're very good at. The weather, of course, has been pretty good since the whole lockdown started a year ago. So that's helped that people can congregate socially distance or so outside, and that has been good. We also extended home deliveries. We do free home deliveries to housebound elderly anyway, but we extended this to anybody who felt vulnerable or just asked for help. And this massively increased, which was a big workload for the staff. But we were helped by a whole posse of volunteers to deliver the groceries to them. We set up a hardship fund for anybody who is seriously in trouble to, in confidence, come and ask for help. And we actually would provide them with groceries free of charge. I'm glad to say we haven't had to use that too much because people have used their own initiative and they're independent. And I suppose a lot of people have been furloughed, etc. But it was well appreciated by the population. And we also were able to buy Chromebooks for every child in the primary school, which was a great boost. And the primary school were very grateful. And it means the children's education can carry on as best as possible in this difficult time. And that's probably about a pen picture of where we're at.
Thanks, Ian. I think your example is fantastic to show how a community shop can be at the centre of a regeneration of a whole place and how important the shop has become beyond just providing groceries and a post office service. So hopefully the others of us who are newer to community shop world will be able to follow in your footsteps. I'm going to move on next to Peter. So we have Peter Sunderland from Blackpool and Gartmore, which is still a relatively rare example of a community shop in Scotland, but one that I expect will grow quickly in the future. And it'd be really interesting to hear a bit more about the village there, because I know that the pub is not the only community-owned asset there. So I'm just going to hand over to you now, Peter.
Hi guys, how are you doing? It's funny speaking to an audience that don't respond, but anyway, there you go. Let me get this onto the full screen. Okay, so I'm Peter. Gartmore is in Stirlingshire. We are about 20 miles from Stirling town itself. Nearest village is Aberfoyle, which is about 3 or 4 miles away. Sometimes you go through an afternoon where you've listened to lots of success stories and you feel like a complete and utter failure. But I think the one message I want to get across is that we made plenty of mistakes and there's plenty more to be made, that's for sure. So I'll just give you a potted history of where we've come from, but Ian is the sage. Ian knows, I always think we're going to catch up on Ian one day, but he's got at least a 22, 23 year head start on our community ownership. So, so here we are, we're in Gartmore, and I think the potted history I would say to start with is that this is a village that has grown in confidence. It was in 1997 that the village shop was closing, and there was a public meeting held, and various ideas bandied about, and then someone says, what about a community buyout, which happened. I've been in the village a year, 2 years when this had happened. I'd come from London town, and it was big business, and how do you give better value to shareholders was all I was about. So this was quite novel. Anyway, I stuck my hand up and eventually found that I was elected as the sub-postmaster and the chair of the village shop, and it's been that way ever since, also the licensee. But I still bow in total superiority to Lord Ian from Appin, as he should be called. Anyway, so we bought the village shop in '97. We don't have a quarry nearby, unfortunately, that is a pot of gold. We dodge along every year and we get a bit of money here and a bit of there. We funded the shop with a leader grant, half of it, and the rest was funded by shares on the same model as Ian is using in Appin, which probably was the only option that we had then. So the success of the shop has been the AGM. Every year we get at least 50 turning out. It's not a particularly big village and not a particularly affluent village either, but we get at least 50, 55 turning out, and the questions are varied and serious as to, why do we do more organic or less organic, and we listen, and we really do try and incorporate everyone's ideas. So the shop trades on happily. We didn't own the flat above the shop nor the big garden at the back, and the lady that was there, we looked after for about 10 years. I say looked after, she was really pretty affected with dementia, and she would come down every day and buy another loaf of bread, another 2 loaves of bread. And so it was dealt with sensitively, and the family were appreciative and allowed us to buy the flat at open market value. So that was fine, and that goes, and that trades on. So across the square from the shop is the Black Bull. Black Bull's been there 280 years, and we'd always kind of had half an eye on the Black Bull. And then it was about 2014, I'd said to the then owners that, look, life's tough, and if you're thinking of giving up, give us a shout. Can't promise we'll do anything, but we'll do our best to try and take it into community ownership. And so it was 2017, they actually came back. I did ask them a few times in the middle and said, look, if you are thinking about it, give us a shout. And it just had got too tough for them. And in 2017, they said, yep, we're keen to sell, and we'll give you first bite to go for it. So it's all very well in theory chatting about these things, but then you're left with the challenge. And so we got it valued, and a few public meetings, and there was a strong appetite to acquire it. But that came because by this time, obviously, the village knows that you can actually operate a shop in community ownership, and it can work. We applied to the land fund. They knocked us back to start with, basically rightly saying, does the village actually need it? These funds could maybe go anywhere else. But we reconsulted, we revised our application, and in May 2019, the land fund said, yes, I'll give you the numbers in a minute. So it was May 2019, we launched the share offer with the assistance of Community Share Scotland. We would go down a community benefit society this time. And I should say this is a completely separate company to the shop. The shop guys said, look, we're very happy for you to go and get involved with the pub, but we're happy as we are, and we'll carry on serving in terms of the shop, and you can do your own thing. So that's what happened. So we launched the share offer in July 19, and the owners wanted out, and we had to really get our skates on, because there was always the possibility that they decided, look, you're hanging about too much. They didn't want to trade another bad winter, and so we really had to get our finger out. So July 19, a lot of publicity, put the share offers out, and we raised the 70,000 that we were looking for to give us some working capital, bit of improvement money, and to the balance of the sale price. And this is where there's no rivalry between me and Ian at all, but he shut for 3 days, we shut for 2 hours. The deal was done at 4 o'clock, And at 6 o'clock, we had all the staff trained, and we pulled the first pint. I always think it's like someone going into Downing Street. The happiest moment is when they move in, but after that, it's all downhill ever since. Anyway, we pulled the first pint at 6 o'clock on the 2nd of September, 2019. A bit of the financials. The hotel, because it's got 6 bedrooms, restaurant, and 3 or 4 public rooms and a bar, was valued at 250,000. Trading figures wouldn't substantiate that, but they reckon that it could be converted to a big house, quite easily. And this is part of the not the requirement, but what the land fund would like to see is us buying at a discount. So we bought at 5% discount for 237.5, which the owners kindly gave us. The land fund gave us 218,500, and the share offer gave us 70. And for those of you quick at maths, that's more than we needed, but we did need some working capital. So there we are. We've bought it. The pub is pulling pints. What happens next? Well, that's when the fun starts, doesn't it? So we trained volunteers, all trained in the licensing legislation particularly. We hired a chef who was a great chef, good guy, very cooperative, very helpful. We were then approached by Bones Soup Productions on behalf of the BBC. Now, I should say, Bones Soup is owned by Tom Kerridge. So Tom Kerridge had sold this idea to the BBC about saving Britain's pubs, and they liked us. I should also say we are not the first community-owned pub in Scotland. That is the Mcnichol in Dunlop in Ayrshire. And I feel for Mcnichol because they were absolutely the forerunners, and they, for whatever reason, were more photogenic or something, or easier to get to. So BBC decided to film us, and Tom Kerridge arrived in January. Of course, then we have lockdown in March. The one big issue that Tom and I totally disagreed on, we are not a poor village, but we're certainly not a rich village. And you know, when you're involved in the shop, you know the number of people that are on top-up electricity and whatever else. And so we were determined that nobody was going to go hungry in the pandemic. So we did a 2-course meal for £5. And now Tom just blew the gasket at that. He was selling fish and chips at £35 a pot, you know. So you could see there's a big difference between us. He thought we'd go bust. I said, I'd rather go bust and know that nobody went hungry in the pandemic. And it was, you know, it was bowls of soup and a really big mac cheese and all that sort of stuff we're doing for the £5. But we also did more expensive meals, you know, 20 quid meals and that sort of stuff. Also in the lockdown, we had started just before the lockdown doing a bit of refurb on the bedrooms, and we were able to carry on with that because there was no heat and we really had to protect the building. What then happened was amazing, particularly as the lockdown eased. We had over 100 people coming in and putting farrow and ball in the bedrooms and really getting stuck into it so they feel it. Then, of course, we opened up and the Chancellor gave us a tenner a meal, and August was absolutely boom time and blew the business plan out of the water. The bad news was October came and we were locked, and we've been closed since then. And so we had our AGM in January, a few weeks ago. For the first time ever in village history, there were 4 positions on the Community Benefit Society, and there were 9 people standing, so there was a full election. At that point, I decided, this was in discussion with Tom and a few others, that I've done my bit, we've got it there, and I was stepping down. So I chaired the last AGM last week, a week before, counted the count and declared the winners. And so now I'm simply going to be able to go into the Black Bull and enjoy Malbec. So finally, reflections, absolutely no doubt at all. Without community ownership, we would have a dead village. There would be no shop. There's no economic reality to having a shop. You know, we could get Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Waitrose, anyone will deliver. But you don't get the chat, and you don't get the difference. Like Appin, we had queues outside the door during the first lockdown. I remember, so we had people on the door. I remember doing door duty, and this lady coming out who'd lost her husband 3 months before, and I said, Carol, I said, that's good, the queue's not very long. She says, no, I will go back in and come back out when the queue is longer. I said, why are you coming back when the queue's longer? So you get a longer chat, she said, and that's the reality of it for her. So we wouldn't have a shop, there would be no post office, and the owners have said there'd be no pub. They would have definitely never reopened it, and it would have been sold, eventually it had been converted to housing, because we wouldn't have been able to compete. And finally, ingredients for success, I think, look at Iain, you've got somebody who believes in it as a concept, and a committed, selfless individual, and that you need a group of those to keep it going. And then lots of support from community shares, Plunkett, Land Fund. We are so lucky in this country, in Scotland particularly, to have all that level of support. So that's the story of the Blackpool. Lots more to tell, lots more mistakes to be made, but go for it if you're thinking of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. That was really fascinating, and hopefully we'll see some more community pubs joining the small collection of community pubs in Scotland soon. Next up, we have Rachel Thompson from Morebattle Community Shop. Borders is a bit of a hotspot at the moment for new community shops getting set up. I want to say thanks to Rachel because she's standing in fairly last minute for someone else who couldn't make it. Rachel has been involved with the community shop since the outset. And what we're going to do first with Rachel is we're going to show you a little film about the shop, and then Rachel's going to come on for a couple of minutes just to give you a few more details.
The previous owner was a retired school teacher who was third generation Morebattle. She bought the shop. After 7 years of trading, it was getting beyond her. She wanted the community to keep that going, because once it died, that was it. No shop.
So it's decided to hold a public meeting, and it was a very packed meeting, and it was made obvious that the community were completely behind taking on the village shop. And from that meeting, a committee was formed to make this happen.
The business plan showed that it was feasible, so which underpinned our application to the Scottish Land Fund. We were successful with the Scottish Land Fund, which was absolutely terrific.
So about a year ago, we heard the fantastic news that the Scottish Land Fund had awarded us £143,000, which is amazing after all our effort.
We were formed as a community benefit society, which means that we're really a co-op. And the share offer was a success, and we managed to bring in, I think it was £63,000,
which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which not only meant that we could meet the cost of the shop, but it also gave us some funding to do the work, do a lot of the work that's required doing to bring it up to present day standard.
We started this project 2 years ago, and in January this year we took over the ownership and the management of the shop.
I was born and bred in the village, and my earliest recollections was of this shop being a centre of the village and a hub for the community. There used to be at least 7 shops, and now we're down to 2 in the village, and it's important that we keep that going to serve the community.
The main aim of any new business is to still be here this time next year.
Make it financially viable.
And the first year to be able to take a second year forward.
And have people enjoy each other's company and tell them about what they've bought and how they can get new lines from the shop and open it up more. But it's lovely to see school children coming in a little group and buying, and I know they can run around the supermarket. It's not the same, and memories are made from villages. And here we are, still got our local shop that Annie's and Grandad's used to go to.
In fact, Morebattle is the place to be.
Morebattle is a place to be if the sun always shines like that, Rachel. Do you want
Definitely.
to just with where the shop is now? Thanks.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope you enjoyed this short video. You've all got a small glimpse of what Morebattle Community Shop is all about. We're very much newbies to this whole business, having opened our doors back in January 2019. I know I was asked to talk about the benefits that Morebattle Shop has brought to the community, but I don't think I need to elaborate. We all know what the benefits are of having a community shop in your community, except to say it's a vital, essential service, a real asset that's worth keeping, even more so in this current climate. Probably what's more interesting to people out there is the hurdles that we've encountered, and there have been many, as other community shops and pubs have probably found out to their costs. The first thing I'd like to say is we bought an unprofitable, overstaffed shop, which required extensive upgrading. We needed to hit the ground running fast and follow the advice in our business plan. When you have approximately 210 shareholders and £63,000 of their money invested in the business, you have to act, otherwise the money wouldn't have lasted for very long. So our first port of call was we hired a HR professional to guide us around the 2P process, as we'd inherited 5 part-time paid assistants. Redundancies were unfortunately made. It was obvious that a manager was required to oversee the business. Stock lines were overhauled, new suppliers were sought, and pricing of the stock was having to be looked at. We also had tremendous difficulty with our bank, recognising that we were a community benefit society, and that was our business model registered by the Financial Conduct Authority. We were not a charity. It took our accountants and the treasurer a number of months to sort this out. So a piece of advice to anyone out there doing this, make sure you leave plenty of time to sort out bank accounts, etc. Maybe there should be a national information programme to the banks to know what we're all about. One of our other hurdles, particularly in our very rural areas, getting together a volunteer management board with the right set of skills. It's okay if you live in the city, there's probably an abundance of people there that are willing to help, but in our small rural area, we do find it very hard and challenging to get a good bunch of people on board. It's also a huge time commitment, which generally it does go unnoticed by the majority of the shareholders and people in the community, but they do appreciate what we all do. The good stuff about Morebattle is after 2 years of trading, Morebattle shop is now a well supported and well stocked community shop, which we're making a small profit, which is fantastic. We sell fresh fruit, vegetables, local produce, and that includes honey, broccoli, blueberries, goat's cheese, fresh bread and cakes, which weren't previously sold. And much more importantly, we've recently started selling alcohol after huge customer demand following the first lockdown. We have a wonderful outside garden area created and managed by volunteers. We now have in place a manager, it's a job share, and we have 17 fantastic and enthusiastic volunteers without whom the shop wouldn't be open. We've managed to hold on to our outreach post office service that comes twice a week, which is even more vital now considering the bank branches keep closing all around us. And also, we've following a grant funding from the Scottish Borders Council, we've fully refurbished and let out the flat above the shop, which is another important source of income. We continue to upgrade the shop as and when funding allows. So as you can hear, Morebattle, we're in a good place at the moment, and long may it continue. I would just like to say a couple of things just while we've got the Plunkett Foundation online and also Community Share Scotland. I'd like to thank both of you, Plunkett Foundation, for the initial support and guidance they provided in terms of funding opportunities and advice on what business model Morebattle should adopt, namely a community benefit society. And I'd also like to thank Community Share Scotland for their help with the share offer and all the legalities surrounding it and supporting us through our first AGM. My advice to people out there starting out in any community project is to use these people. Ask questions. They are the most invaluable people you can ever find. So just want to say good luck to all of you out there if you're starting on the journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. It's fantastic to hear how far you've come in a relatively short period of time and all the volunteers that you've got on board at Morebattle. We're going to move on now to Hannah Ewan from Community Carrot, which is based in the town of Dunbar. The community in Dunbar took over a greengrocer which had been running in the town for a number of years and was at threat of closing down. So Hannah, I will just hand over to you.
Right. Hello, I'm Hannah and I'm the Development Officer for the Community Carrot. This is not the first. Oh, sorry, I think I might be having computer problems that don't normally happen. Okay, that's the first slide, right. So we are also relatively new and there are quite a lot of parallels with our journey, how we got here and the early years of Appin's, I thought. So similarly, so the Crunchy Carrot had been on the high street for 20 years. That's the name that we still trade under is the Crunchy Carrot. And the owners wanted to retire. They had been looking for a buyer for quite a few years and hadn't found one. And it's quite likely that they wouldn't have found, I mean, it's very unlikely that they would have found one, to be honest. We've got a big Asda, we've got a Mcnichol, we've got a co-op, and we've got a high street co-op. So we've got quite a lot of competition from the supermarkets. Sorry, I'm just, yeah, no, everything's fine. But we've still got a really enthusiastic customer base, really supportive customer base. So the owners approached a couple of sort of key customers and kind of rallied up some interest, asking if there'd be any interest in a community buyout. And the threat of losing it was very motivating. So gosh, my computer's being really slow. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go to the next slide and it's not working. I'll just leave it there and hope that it catches up with me, but ignore it if it doesn't. So we set up a steering group. I wasn't involved at this point. The steering group involved there were 3 original owners of the Crunchy Carrot. It involved some of them and some managers, 1 or 2 kind of key long-term customers. We moved from that point to setting up a community benefit society, and at that point the owners obviously moved on because that would have been a conflict of interest. So anyone who is employed by the business stepped down, and from the first kind of green shoots took about 3.5 years to get to the point of buying it in November 2019. We had so much support from Community Share Scotland, initially loads of support from Plunkett as well, and that was absolutely invaluable. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we had some really, really useful skills on our board, and I would say that was essential. We have an accountant who forced us all to sit down in many meetings and talk about finance, which was something that without that skill and experience, we probably wouldn't have gone into those numbers with the depth that was absolutely essential for the business plan, for the cash flow forecasts. We had people who spent hours and hours on the Scottish Land Fund applications, and we were successful in those, which was, without that, we wouldn't have been able to buy the business at all. Like, we would not have been able to raise that amount of money. So we got 119,000, oh, I wish this was working, 119,000 from the Scottish Land Fund, and we raised 62,000 with a community share offer, which was our absolute baseline was 37,000, our safety was 50,000, and the 62,000 has been essential because my recommendation is to not open a community shop at the beginning of a pandemic, it has been difficult for us. We've had to change our entire business model. We had to change it in the course of one weekend when the lockdown hit. And I would also say that was one of the benefits of having that community model as well, because we could pivot really quickly. We were flexible. We had huge volunteer base. We had to completely close the shop, and we've only opened it since then. We opened for a few days before Christmas, allowing 3 people in, but the shop's not really big enough to have any more than 3, and we haven't opened it since because if the staff get COVID, we'll just have to shut, and that financially that would be terrible. So we sell from the shop door, but mainly for almost a year now, we have been doing deliveries. We've been a delivery only service. And we had so many people step up for volunteer delivery driving. We've just had a huge amount of support. So we promoted the share offer document. We had a hugely well attended launch party. We had physical meetings, we had social media. So we had people on the board, not me on the board doing communications. And also really importantly, some of the money from the Scottish Land Fund was for the development officer role, which has been, I know it's me saying it, I'm invaluable, but it has been really, really helpful because it lifts the communications burden off of the managers. It allows us to speak to our customers about everything that's going on, and we've had quite a lot of really major changes obviously to the business model, so it means that we can work out what's tell people what's happening there. And we've got our community outreach work that I do as well. So there's sustainability work with that. We've got funding for a electric van. I do food projects, including a food waste project. So there's quite a lot going on that side of things as well, which obviously wouldn't be happening if it wasn't a community business. And we learned that it is hard work. It's more work for everyone on the board. It's always more work than people expect when they join the board, but people are really dedicated to it. And if we didn't have a crunchy carrot, we would have to try and start it from scratch and open the crunchy carrots, because it's completely essential on our high street. It's a lot easier to buy a community business than it is to start from scratch. We were really lucky that the owners wanted to sell and they wanted to retain the ethos of the existing business, and they were willing to wait around. I think if it had been a private seller that we were trying to buy the building from, they probably wouldn't have been able to wait for the length of time that it took us to raise the money. So that was really useful. And yeah, we're really looking forward to being able to open up, because I would say again, it's a community hub. So people do chat in the line, but it's not the same as them being able to come into the shop, talk to the managers and the staff, see the produce, see what's on offer, to ask people questions about how to use it, where it comes from. We're really, really looking forward to being able to do that again. Yeah, I think that's probably my 5 minutes. I'm sorry my presentation didn't work.
Thanks, Hannah, that's brilliant. Can never be 100% sure of technology when you're doing one of these Zoom webinars.
Yeah.
I think your presentation kind of highlights the strength of the community model that's come out through everyone's presentations about how quickly everyone was able to respond to COVID last year, and that kind of community model of getting volunteers involved was really, really helpful. But I think, yeah, everyone is looking forward to going back to normal operations at some point this year.
Yeah, really can't wait.
So I'm going to ask everyone to come who's spoken so far to come back on, turn on your video and your microphone, and then I'm going to go straight to questions from the audience, because we've got quite a few. Do feel free to keep typing in your questions, because if we don't get through them all today, we will ask people the answers and come back to you with responses. So Ian, there's a couple of questions here for you. One is about how you deal with competition from supermarkets, and the second is about the number of residents you have in your area. If you were able to answer those questions, that would be great.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
No, nor can I, and I've pressed the video, but it won't. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The number of people in our area is, well, 500 in the whole Appin area, about 120 in the village itself. So our turnover of nearly £500,000 a year is pretty good with that sort of numbers. We do have a good tourist business in the area normally, but you know, we have got a lot of good, faithful local customers. Our prices are really very reasonable, because we're a Booker Premier store. On any one day, we have 50 items which are cheaper than Tesco's. So although Tesco's deliver more and more and more, the village, I mean, there's 3 or 4 vans a day come in. There's an awful lot of people in the village just will not use them, which is great. We've every year we think we're going to have trouble with the supermarkets, and but we keep developing new brands that you can't get in supermarkets. As I say, we're now dealing with a cash and carry, not on a regular basis, but sort of every couple of months from Bristol, who deliver on £1,000 orders only. But they're very high quality, incredibly interesting stuff, which is popular, and people like that. They come in and get stuff that they cannot even get in Tesco's and Oban. So that's great.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Ian, the next question is for Peter. I suppose it's from Penny Edwards. I think it's that kind of dilemma question of, are you possibly removing an opportunity for someone coming in who might want to set up their own business? And I think that's a question that probably every community business asks themselves. So how did you know the pub wouldn't have been bought by a young couple? Because Penny's community is in the same position.
Good question, Penny. Because it was being sold every 2, 3, 4 years, and the price was getting less, and the struggle was getting greater. We're only 2 or 3 miles from Aberfoyle, where there are 3 licensed premises and a lot bigger footfall, and it just would not have stacked up. There was nothing wrong with the previous owners. They really put heart and soul into it. They worked, they were good in the kitchen. And so, yeah, you may always have got somebody, but I don't think it would have opened at all. And the history, which is why Tom Kerry did the programme, is that there are 17 similar places a week closing in the UK. Now, our view was not to, and this was, I think, they didn't say this, but I suspect the Land Fund was saying, are we buying a drinking hole to suit Victor Meldrew so we can have a moan and a pint? But it really is the hub. And interestingly, since it's in community ownership, lots of people have come in that wouldn't have gone in when it was privately owned. So it's been, it has proven it's worth and will continue to be there. So does that answer your question, Penny?
Great, Peter.
Okay.
I think when you're going to fund as well, you really need to be able to build a convincing argument that you're not displacing someone else. So
totally, yeah.
In that situation.
Yeah.
And while you're on, Peter, can I also ask you a question from Hina Harani, who's asking about what other village amenities that there were? Are the community pub and the shop, I suppose, the main community facilities, or have you got other things?
There's a village hall, which they put a lot of work into about 10, 12 years ago. There's also a small school, which is growing. There's a church and a play park. So that's it. I mean, we're not a big population, smaller than Appin. I think our total population, including the outlying farms, is about 250 of a population. So not untypical of lots and lots of Scottish villages. But normally the shop would have been shut. There's no reason, there's no rationale as to why the shop would be open. We don't have, our turnover in the shop is half of Appin's and even less. I mean, we struggle to get to 200, 210, all paid staff, and the shop, the pub will go to paid staff as well. We are lucky. I mean, getting on BBC Two really should get us motoring. You with me? You got to see Tom Kerridge outside your pub, and a lot of people already turn up to have a look and see what the place looks like. So we can't. I mean, that was just a stroke of luck getting that, and we hope it'll work for us.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the same question to Rachel about, do you have other community organisations in Morebattle, and how do you work together?
Yes, there's lots. Well, I was going to say there's lots. We're very. Well, the community is very great on coffee mornings, any fundraising things that are going on. It's very well supported. There's lots of little clubs that go on, obviously, in the village hall, and we have a village institute. Obviously, they're not happening at the moment. We also have a pub in the village. Unfortunately, that closed. Well, it's closed just because of COVID. We'll hopefully reopen soon. And we also have a butcher's that opens, half days during the week and stuff. I think we all support each other. There is also community, there's been a buyout of a field actually behind the pub, and they're hopefully going to do a community garden. I think they've also secured Scottish Land Fund money. It's taken them a while to get off the ground, but that'll be interesting, and we'll try and work together with them. I mean, they're thinking of maybe doing an orchard, and maybe, I don't know, vegetable patches, who knows, we can maybe sell the veg in the shop. But I think it's great that we can work together. About 4 miles away, there's a shop, there's Yetham, a village called Yetham, and they're just also hopefully turning into a community shop as well. So who knows, in the future, we could all work together. It'd be good.
Something we notice a lot of Community Land Scotland, once a community's bought an asset, you tend to see more of that, and then the neighbouring village goes, oh, that seems to be working quite well, and it starts to spread, and so it's really positive to see that happening.
I think that's the case. I think the seeing how we're working, and like we say, community shop, I think a lot more people are interested, and they're probably more happier to come and shop in a community shop rather than a privately owned shop. I don't know, but they like the idea of shopping in a community shop and supporting the local community.
Thank you. The next question is about plans for shops and pubs to have EV charging points. Hannah, I'm going to ask that of you because I know you've got a strong environmental strand to your work, but I don't know if your location is suitable for that. Is that something you've been...
So we can't get a charger outside the shop, but East Lothian Council have offered to give us a dedicated charge point that's just at the other end of the high street, which is where we'll base our vans. So at the moment we charge it, there's a car park that's nearby, so it's not as convenient as if we could charge it while we were loading and unloading, but it seems to be working. She says, I don't work in the shop, so I've delegated that one out, but there don't seem to be any huge complaints coming my way from the shop staff. And hopefully we will soon have our own dedicated charge point, so we won't get into the problem when take up grows. We won't get into the problem where we're blocked out of charge points.
Thanks. Iain, have you got any plans for anything like that? I know a lot of community shops are either installing like cycling facilities or EV charging points. Are you able to do anything like that in Port Appin?
Some 7 years ago, we were invited to apply for green funding, and we applied for electric minibus and charging point opposite the shop, and we just were turned down flat, which was very disappointing. So I must admit, since then we've kind of not really revisited the area. We've got a wonderful little garage in the village, which is very popular and serves a huge amount of area for MOTs and stuff, and we really don't want it to be too much competing with that business. Although it's obviously it's a internal combustion engine based business at the moment, but it's something we've certainly thought about. But I say we were kind of put off when we just got no response at all from the group who had actually invited us to apply for funding.
Hopefully something you can go back to in the future.
Yep.
Thank you, Iain. We're actually at Community Land Scotland. One thing, the things we're doing at the moment is we're doing a bit of research into how community owners are responding to the climate emergency. So within that, there's quite a lot of shops that are doing really interesting things. So we'll be publishing that within the next couple of months. So just keep an eye on our website for that. Question for Peter from Morven Gibson. Did you consider leasing the pub to an individual or individuals to run on behalf of the community?
Yes, but the pub's turnover at that point in time was too low to make it viable to anybody. So that is still a possibility, because those of you who worked in hospitality, it's full on, but can have good rewards. So basically, we are trying to build up the turnover to a sustainable level, and we think we'll reach that this year. I mean, but that is an option then of saying, fine, we've got it to this level now, we'll hand it over to a couple or an individual on a lease basis, you with me, and take it from there. But we're not so it wouldn't be fair on anyone to take it on up until this point in time. But I could see that being an option maybe in 12 months' time when you got a good 12 months trading record. So yeah, it's in the option, but it wasn't viable to start with. And to be honest with you, having volunteers, I mean, it was amazing with 70-year-olds who were volunteering, and they hadn't worked in a bar since they were 17. Well, believe it or not, they started putting on the mini skirts, and they really, it took 10, 20 years off their life as they got involved, and everyone got to know each other a lot better. And to be honest with you, working as volunteers, even in the lockdown doing the bedrooms, people had never been upstairs in this place that they lived in 20, 30 years. It's amazing the difference it made. So I'm glad we didn't go down that route, because now people feel a lot more sense of ownership for it. But who knows, it might happen in the future.
And off the top of your head, do you know how many people are employed in the pub and the shop combined?
Employed, so the shop has got 6 staff, nobody full-time, but there are 6 employees in the shop, and the pub employees have only got 1 at the moment, but that will go up to 10 fairly quickly, 10 part-time. So the plan would be to put in a manager fairly quickly alongside the paid-for chef, and then the rest are just all volunteer, are a mixture of volunteers and part-time bar staff. So we are all, the bar was volunteers, but we're moving on to paid as soon as we can afford it.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
Ian, I seem to remember you've got quite a few staff in your shop as well.
Yes, in the shop itself, we've got 2 full-time staff, 2 half-time staff, and a bookkeeper who is self-employed. And the craft shop, which we wholly own but lease, employs 2 people on their own right. That was actually quite interesting, because before we leased it, we actually ran it in-house, and it was a total disaster, because we were having to pay a salary. Well, you know, we pay a living wage to all staff, and we were paying a living wage. Now, if you're running a craft shop in beginning of December in Appin, there's not much footfall. So we actually found that disastrous. And when we put it out to tender, and this couple took it on, they completely revamped it. They've got over 100 crafters locally supplying them. The quality of stuff is great. It was in the Herald's 15 best independent shops in Scotland last year, and it's transformed it. And we get a steady income of £500 a month rental, which during the pandemic we actually suspended. We just gave a complete rent holiday.
I think it's quite, especially community shops, but a lot of other, craft shops, hotels, pubs and things, where communities tend to go more for the leasing option, because those businesses work well with someone kind of running it and putting their own creativity into it. Whereas community shops are often, because they're very much like at the heart and people think there's a lot they can add on to it, often stay kind of directly in community control, and the staff are employed by the community. I know Plunkett Foundation have got a lot of information on the range of employees in shops, from fully volunteer run to fully staff run, and they've got some really useful information on their website about that. We're coming close to the end of our hour, so I'm just going to fit in one other question, and then we'll go back. Everyone else's question, we'll come back to you with an answer afterwards. So it's a question from Alison Crook, and while you're still on, Ian, can I ask you, maybe you don't have to develop your network of contacts because everyone comes to you as you are the sage of community shops, but do you stay networked with other community shops, or do you find that's kind of not a priority so much now that you've been running for such a long time?
Well, certainly over the years we've networked with lots of people, and I've been lucky over the years to be invited to talk to various groups in various places, and we keep in touch with most of those, like your own group, in Cowell. And in fact, just this week, the shop in Carloway in Lewis, which I did some work for Plunkett 6 years ago now, has finally got to the stage of they've got planning application in, and they've got tender out for renovation work for the school. So we do try to keep in touch, and it certainly helps because we certainly can learn from each other. And I think that one of the dangers we have, I suppose, having been established so long, is we think we know it all, and we certainly don't.
And one interesting shops is the technology. You need to have such up-to-date technology, don't you? That's been a real learning curve for us. You need to be constantly on top of EPOS systems and things like that.
Yeah, we have a very sophisticated, well, for a small shop, sophisticated computer system that when we buy stuff in Booker's, it immediately is fed into our computer system. So when the stuff arrives from Booker's in the lorry on a Monday, it just has to be checked in. It doesn't have to be logged in or anything. And that saved a huge amount of time. And it means we can press a button and know exactly at any point in time, what's happening, what the stock is, what the turnover is. And that's been a great tool to make sure that things don't go wrong. Because in the early days, it was, we're relying on month figures, 2 month figures. And suddenly when things began to go a little bit wrong, we were panicking. Whereas now we can see things immediately if there's a problem, which is, it is an important tool in running a very, very marginal business.
Yeah, and it's very small profits in a community shop, aren't you? So keeping on top of everything is really important.
Yeah.
Just before we finish up for this section, before we move on to Morven and Chris, can I just ask the same question of Rachel as a relatively new community shop? How have you found networking with the other community shops that are out there?
We haven't really networked with any community shops. I think we're just, we're too fresh, I think. I do know in the planning stages when, we did visit a couple of community shops in the area. So we had a list of questions to go and ask them, what were the pitfalls and blah, de blah. And they were very helpful, actually, because that's what you do. You learn from the mistakes of others, hopefully, and you hopefully try not to do the same mistakes yourself. So yeah, no, we haven't really done any networking. I mean, we've had a few phone calls with Yetham community shop as they go through their journey, but no, we haven't really liaised with anyone. So yeah.
I was saying to Chris before we started what a minefield of information, a mine of information the Plunkett closed Facebook page for shops is, because there's lots and lots of community shops on there. So it doesn't matter how obscure your community shop question is, usually someone has an answer for you. So on that note, I'm just going to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers who've talked so far. Just really inspiring to hear your stories and the diversity of what is happening out there. And we'll be back in touch with these questions that we've not got through today. So thank you very much to all of you.
All right, bye.
I'm now going to move on to the section where we'll get advice from the specialist support organisations. So this afternoon we've got Morven and Lyon from Community Share Scotland, who's going to talk us through that model. And then we have Chris Cowcher from Plunkett Foundation, who's going to talk a bit about their support. And then we'll have time up until about past to take questions from Chris and Morven. So I'm going to hand over to Morven now to tell us a bit about Community Share Scotland.
Lindsay, I can't seem to start my video. It's saying the host has disabled it.
Carrie.
Oh, there we go. I'm on now. There we are. Can everyone see me? Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, thanks for having me today. It's so nice to see so many familiar, friendly faces and to hear how everybody's getting on. Just to start with, I'm just popping my contact details in the chat box. So that is there, and I'll share my screen now. So yeah, my name is Morven Lyon, and I am the programme manager for an organisation called Community Shares Scotland. A thread that has been running through the presentation so far today is this idea of raising money through a community share offer. So I just want to talk to you about the basics of what that is. And then also explain who Community Shares Scotland are and all the free support that we have available to groups who want to pursue this fundraising model. On a basic level, community shares are a way to raise finance. So in a nutshell, it's a way to raise money for community-based enterprises. Today we are talking about pubs and shops, and that is a large chunk of the work we've done over the past 6 years. However, essentially, if it's the definition of community enterprise is pretty wide. It falls under the umbrella of crowdfunding. So I imagine a lot of you have heard about crowdfunding. What makes community shares different is it has community ownership at the heart of it. So anyone who invests in your community enterprise becomes a member of that enterprise. And then they have a say in how it's governed. They are able to sit on the management committee and feel true ownership over the direction that the enterprise will take. Like I said, today is all about pubs and shops, but we've also worked with community hubs. We're increasingly getting quite a lot of inquiries about community-led housing and how community shares might fit into that sector. We've worked with lots of renewable energy initiatives, sports, food, farming, creative enterprises. Like I said, as long as it's a community and as long as there's enterprise at the heart of it, then community shares finance can be used. In terms of what the benefits are of community shares finance, so why use this type of fundraising for your project? First and foremost, this is about growing your membership. So anyone who invests becomes a member of your organisation. And what that means is it truly increases community control and community governance of the enterprise. And the added benefit of that is when people invest in something, they're much, much more likely to use the service. So I imagine if we asked all of our case studies today, they would say that those shareholders are more invested in the project financially, but also from the fact that they are much more likely to actually use the pub or use the shop. It's very democratic. So what we mean by that is it's one member, one vote. So regardless of how much money people put in, and that can be £10, that can be £100,000 as the legal maximum. Everybody just gets one vote, one say in how they want the enterprise to run. This is about having the social cause at the heart of the business. Yes, some community share offers can offer a small amount of interest, so say in the region of 2, 3, 4%. But this isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. So this isn't about people trying to make money out of the enterprise. It's about having that social return of your investment right at the heart of the investment itself. It's quite flexible finance. So we often see that the groups that we work with, they say that no one can withdraw their money within the first 3 to 5 years of the enterprise being up and running. And similarly, stuff like interest payments are always at the discretion of the management committee. So if the enterprise can't stomach it for whatever reason, be it a global pandemic, then in any 1 year it is acceptable for interest payments to be paused. And much like we've been hearing today, community shares finance can attract further funding and partnerships. So if you can demonstrate that the community are behind your idea through a community share offer, then you're much more likely to attract funding from other sources. So the Scottish Land Fund being a key partner of ours, the National Lottery, for example, heritage funding, they look on community shares as a real positive in terms of truly demonstrating that the community are behind the enterprise. A few technical considerations. So community shares aren't transferable. So I can't buy one for a tenner, go to my neighbour and say, hey, can I sell you this for £20? It doesn't work like that. So they're always worth what you buy them for in the first place. They are withdrawable, so you have to give people the option to get their money back at some point down the line, and that is something that we'll support you with to make sure that that is something you can afford. And like I said, some share offers do offer some interest to shareholders, and there are some tax relief options as well for investors. So that's the basics of what community shares are. In terms of who we are and the support that is available, the good news is there is a lot of support and it is free. So 2 big ticks there. So Community Shares Scotland is a programme that sits within the Development Trusts Association Scotland. There are 3 members of staff, myself, Toby in the middle there, and my colleague Lynn. We have 3 key aims. So first of all, just to raise awareness of the model. We also can deliver training to intermediary organisations. And then the big chunk of what we do, so I'd say 80% of our day-to-day work is directly supporting communities to do a community share offer and to raise finance for their community-based enterprises. What that looks like is this journey on the right-hand side here. So it starts with early stage support from the programme team. So emails, as many Zooms as you like, we can talk to the whole board, we can work with you one-on-one. And that's really testing the feasibility, whether community shares are truly the right option. If we agree that they are, then we can offer up to 6 days of tailored consultancy support, again, all for free. So that focuses on things like business planning. So really making sure that the community shares finance element is inserted into your business plan appropriately. Engaging with your community. So we've got lots of resources. We can deliver community engagement workshops. Governance support. So a few of the case studies mentioned that to issue community shares, you have to be a community benefit society or a co-op. So we will help you register your community benefit society structure with the Financial Conduct Authority. And then finally, the actual share offer documentation and launch itself. And that is backed up with a £5,000 micro grant that we have as part of the programme as well. So that covers all your additional costs around launch events. Hopefully one day soon they will be in person again. Marketing costs, if you need any specialist tax or legal support, then we can fund that as well. Just to say here that we're currently about to launch into a partnership with the Plunkett Foundation and with the Cooperative Development Scotland team. So up until now we've had a good working relationship, but we want to strengthen that and make that a little bit more formal to make sure that essentially the customer, so you guys, the community groups across Scotland, they get a seamless journey, and they might not see all the discussion and all the work that's going on behind the scenes, but just to make sure that all our work is fully coordinated and that the groups around Scotland get the most comprehensive support. And then finally, I just kind of want to give you a flavour of the community shares market and how things are looking at the moment. So we've been around since 2014 and we have supported 41 completed community share offers. In total, that has been over £13 million of investment through community shares in Scotland. And really importantly, that has leveraged an additional 24 million to those projects. So for every £1 raised through community shares, about an extra £2 is raised through other funding. And that has come from 12,000 community investors. We did a survey just recently with our groups that we've supported since 2017. So this is stats from the past 3 years. Just to give you an idea of the geographical and the sector splits. So on the right there, you can see that community shops is by far our biggest sector from the past 3 years. and I think that will continue to be the case. We've supported 2 community pubs, but we do have a few more in the pipeline. And like I said, we've got some interesting stuff happening around community housing and potentially expanding the community renewables sector for shares. You will see this big gap in accessible small towns and kind of smaller urban areas is definitely a target for us in phase 3, because you see that a lot of our work has been in rural areas. And then finally, just to leave you with a couple of stats. So we undertook a big survey with all of our community shares investors last year in partnership with Co-ops UK. And we found that of all the businesses that have raised finance through a community share offer, 92% of them are still trading. I don't have the direct comparison to private enterprise, but I believe it's in the region of about 60%. So that really shows you the strength and the resilience of the community shares model. Adding to that, 85% of those groups said that a community share offer had a positive impact on their financial performance. So that's directly relating to the point I was making, that if people invest in something, they are much more likely to care about the success of it, to get behind it in problematic times, and to really use the service. And then finally, I thought this stat was interesting. So 80% of people invest in the community share offer because of the wider social and environmental benefits of the business. So this is truly about that, the social cause at the heart of this business. It's about reworking this idea of economic growth and trying to look at other indicators linked to community well-being and community strength and community resilience. I'll stop there. I have no idea if that was 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but yeah, I'll stop there. And like I said, please get in touch if you want to access any of our support. My contact details are in the chat box. Thank you.
Thanks, Morven. That's great. Very interested to hear you're looking at community housing next. That'll be of interest to a lot of our members.
Yeah, yeah, all sorts of inquiries lately. So that's definitely the next big thing, I think.
I'm just going to hand over to Chris now, and then we'll come back for a bit of Q&A. So
Yeah.
Thanks, Morven.
Thanks ever so much, Lindsay, and thanks for the opportunity to join you all today. It's been really interesting actually listening to the presentations. I don't get a chance very often to sort of sit down and listen to such a kind of comprehensive overview. So it's been brilliant to hear all those kind of individual stories. But to give you a little bit of introduction, my name's Chris Cowcher. I'm the head of community business at the Plunkett Foundation. And for those of you very briefly that haven't heard of us as an organisation, we're a UK-wide charity that supports community ownership models across the UK. And whilst our reputation will most likely be associated with community-owned shops and community-owned pubs, basically if it lends itself to community ownership, Plunkett will be able to offer some form of support. But as Morven said, in Scotland, we're really proud to be collaborating far more with a partnership of organisations such as Community Shares Scotland, Cooperative Development Scotland, and organisations like Cooperatives UK to make sure that the support offer is a much more connected and joined up one for the sector. So to give you a brief overview of where we are, I mean, the shop model, you've heard Port Appin, 40 years old. Unsurprisingly, the sector is a slightly more mature model, and there's now 400 of these kind of businesses trading across the UK. 38 of those are in Scotland, and a further 25 are currently in the pipeline. The pub sector is slightly newer, and actually it's really sort of exploded in the last sort of 5 to 6 years as a model. And again, 3 open in Scotland and 17 in the pipeline. It's a growing interest, but I think this year, against the backdrop of COVID, that idea of kind of collective responsibility and thinking about how businesses can really respond to local need has been at the core of all of these businesses from the moment they're in set up. And so I wanted to focus my little bit of a presentation on about the kind of the more than elements that so many of these businesses are offering in abundance. And the reason I flagged this is because you'll all be familiar with the start points, of these projects being one around saving an asset or saving a service, reinvigorating, reintroducing services. And that community consultation right at the beginning of these conversations is really key to really shaping the direction of where the project heads. But it's one that can continue going. And I think with the shops and the pubs that Plunkett has been really proud to be able to work with, we've seen more and more innovation brought into the model, so that for pubs it's more than just being a place to drink and eat. It's thinking about, could we host libraries, could we run luncheon clubs, could we use the back room within the facility to run youth services at appropriate times. Great examples. And similarly with shops, you've heard sort of Morebattle touching on retaining the postal services, but so many shops are offering so much more than again, those core products that you'd expect to see under the kind of village shop label. And so it's thinking all the time, if you're having those conversations with a real local demographic, you're asking them, how can this business operate to be more sustainable and serve a real purpose and a need. If we can tick the boxes off around social impact when you're writing those funding applications, you'll know these kind of things, you'll know your communities, you'll know that these are a great opportunity to talk about multi-generational activities. Peter's examples of the volunteers getting involved in the Black Bull when they set off, and then potentially those that are going to be employed by these businesses at a later date, really screams of how these businesses are truly inclusive. I know that in the comments there's been a couple of references to the environmental credentials, and Morven just gave that fantastic statistic that a huge number of investors back these projects because of the fact that actually through localized service, through reduction of transport and thinking about other green measures that can be implemented, you can be making a great change locally. The health impacts are massive. I think just the people you've heard from today demonstrate how committed they are to the cause. I think Community Carrot talking about changing their whole business model over the course of a weekend shows a commitment to the customer, commitment to the community, and it's about the people, and I think if we can keep people at the heart of our conversations when it comes to this form of business, the health impacts in the local communities happen in abundance. Economic impacts, goes without saying, these are businesses at their core. Plunkett is an organisation that we offer a huge range of project support from early stage right through to open and trading, and in collaboration with colleagues like Community Share Scotland, we'll make sure that businesses are not going in and out of silos or having to Google. We'll try and facilitate those contacts, and where we're not able to support you, we'll know that generally which partner to go on to next. And as Lindsay said, the peer network of support across the UK, where shops and pubs are coming together and sharing their ideas, is getting stronger and stronger. On an annual basis, when businesses are open, we're a membership organisation, and we offer all our members an annual health check. People can request this. It's a free service. We can help you take a kind of step back and review operations and think about potential plans, or even just a kind of pat on the back and a celebration of, yeah, we've actually done remarkably well in this last 12 months. I'm conscious of time, so that's why I'm kind of flicking through these slides. So the final slide I'll put up is one about keeping in touch, but Plunkett is one of many support organisations, and we're really keen to see this sector continue growing. And so I think these conversations, such as this one hosted today by Community Land Scotland, are so important. If I could finish on a couple of stats myself, in 2020, against the back of a pandemic, 12 community shops opened. Those 12 community shops across the UK raised a collective £500,000 between them. In the community pub sector, an incredible and that's in community shares. In the community pub sector, an incredible £4 million were raised in community shares, and 10 of those pubs, despite there being a pandemic and despite there being multiple restrictions on their trade, 10 still open for the first time for their customer bases. So this model is growing, the interest is there, and I think the opportunity is one that I would encourage any community to have that conversation and explore whether it's a model for them, and then learn from those that have been there and done it before, like the case studies you've heard from here today, and the near 400 shops across the UK and the near 135 pubs. that's my whistle-stop tour through who Plunkett is, and I know that Lindsay's got sort of wider conversations for us to have now.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That's great. Morven, if you want to come back on as well, that would be brilliant. We have time. I think I'll just go on to a couple of questions that have come in. So, Chris, someone was asking earlier about banking as a community benefit society. Very mixed experiences.
Absolutely, and I think, this is a frustration that we unfortunately hear of more commonly than we would expect to, and I think it's been exacerbated by COVID with delays to high street banks recognising FCA registered forms of business. Now, it's not impossible, shops do it and they do find routes, and actually we're working with partners across the UK at the moment, including Social Enterprise UK, Cooperatives UK, School for Social Entrepreneurs, to make representations to both the UK Treasury and in the devolved nations, and trying to influence the banking sector at the moment. And at the moment, even just this morning, I've started a conversation with the FCA to get their backing to make this a much stronger and streamlined process. At the heart of what these businesses are, as Morven set out, these are democratic organisations, and so should be more easily recognisable by the high street banks and not cause any delays in the setup.
Thanks, Chris.
Can I add to that, Lindsay, just a practical point? So the FCA produced a one-pager that just outlines what a community benefit society is and its legal standing. And we found that some groups have some success if they're able to provide that to the bank at the early stage of applying. So that's something that I can share really easily if anyone is keen to use that.
That would be great. Thanks, Morven. We've got a question from Lucy Lawson asking about, how you manage the withdrawal of shares if the enterprise can't afford to have people withdraw their shares, and how you manage the risk of a lot of people withdrawing.
Yeah, good question. There's two sides to this. Firstly, really making sure in early stage business development that you are making sure that your financials are as watertight as possible. So that is why the community shares finance has to be an investment in an enterprise. So you need to be as careful as possible in the first instance with making sure that your financials add up. Yes, there will always be bumps, and there'll be years where things don't go to plan. So there's ways that you can mitigate that risk and put things in place to prepare for that. So the key thing that you can do is write into your rules, so into your constitution, that people cannot withdraw for the first 5 years, for example. Interest won't be paid for the first, say, 3 to 5 years. And I think I said in my presentation that the absolute kind of backstop is that the management committee always have the discretion just to say, actually, we cannot afford withdrawals or interest payments this year. And that is allowed with under the rules of the community benefit societies that we support. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Some people think of community share offers as being something that lasts kind of 6 to 8 weeks, but I think it has an impact on the community way beyond that, and often a very positive impact. And I know you keep in touch with lots of communities that have been through share offers. What's your experience been in terms of that long-term benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. It just is such a lovely way to truly give people in the community ownership of something. So we did a survey that Lindsay, you took part in, thank you for that, just recently. And some of the quotes that we got back really highlighted the ideas of connectivity and positivity. I think somebody said it gave me the chance to own something for the very first time. I think Peter, when I spoke to him, he was saying stuff like, it's brought people to life and it gives the village a focal point. So yes, there's kind of so many ongoing benefits of doing a community share offer.
Thanks, Morven. And just before we finish up, I just have a quick question I wanted to ask Chris about. We've heard today that a lot of communities taking on shops and pubs, they can be really marginal. Sometimes they're about to close down because people are retiring, and that can seem like a really risky thing to take on a business that's already struggling. What does Plunkett's research show on that side of things?
It was, so the businesses can be very marginal. I mean, it won't be any surprise that in the reports I've shared on the chat function for people to download, you can see that shops, for example, both profit or loss, actually the averages sit within that kind of £1 to £5,000 bracket either way. So these businesses really are operating, on a kind of very tight budget, but actually where they are making surpluses, the way they are being reinvested into the local area, Port Appin obviously being a fantastic example of that, really shows that these businesses can contribute so much more. Some quick stats, largest percentage of for turnover for shops is around about sort of 50,000 to 200,000. Around about 20% of community-owned shops will have a turnover in the region of 200 to 400,000, and just 6% will have that kind of higher turnover, of over 400,000. I think, businesses will find a model that operates to suit their community, and they'll continue exploring that product range, as I talked about, that kind of conversation, consultation, and making sure that your product lines are reflective. And again, I keep referencing back to Ian's presentation, but using the cash and carry from Bristol, which I think is sounds like a very long journey for that driver. If it's serving a community purpose and there is a real customer base, that works really well. The pubs model obviously slightly different because of the fact that it's such a kind of a young sector, that to really get that kind of long term view, it's quite challenging. And also with the kind of split of 60% of pubs being managed, and so that's where the community own the pub, run the pub, and sort of run it as a business. So they're looking at that kind of business model. You might see a kind of some pubs with a really small kind of turnover of only about 25,000, I think is one of the smallest in the country, but that can go up to 700,000. So it's a massive bracket, and I think the average is around about sort of £100,000 a year turnover that you would see. But with the tenanted model, of course, the only income that the community will be sort of putting through their books, if you want to put it in kind of financial terms, will be the rent that they're receiving from the tenant. But going back to that slide I put up about more than, and thinking about the kind of wider social benefits, it's really important that if you are going down the tenanted model or the leased model, that you still think, is there more that the community wants when they're investing to save this pub in the first place that goes beyond the business model? Because if there is, you'll need to think about your tenant liaison and making sure that although they will be running the business as any tenant would be in any form of business across the country, they still are reflecting and responding to that sort of genuine community need.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think we're at 3:30 now, so I just want to say a massive thanks again to all our speakers today. I think that was a really interesting webinar. If anyone goes away and they have burning questions, they can get in touch with us and we will try and answer them. But for now, thank you to everyone who's taken part today, and I hope you can join us for some of our other events in the future. Thanks.